Obviously, this is the maybe the only picture of me taken ever drawing when I was a kid. That's my sister reading the paper upside down. If you look in the foreground, you can see my pipe and my matches. If you wonder how kids become cartoonists at a young age, they have very lenient parents. So this isn't something I've done. People often ask, like, how do you become a cartoonist, or like why, or whatever. And all kids draw. I mean, like you've known, almost every little kid likes to draw. And when they draw, like this picture of me at this age, it's like if I don't even know what I'm drawing, but it looks like it's probably somebody's hair. But when you're 5 years old and you draw a giraffe, you're so excited because you drew a giraffe. And it's like, oh my God, that wasn't there, and then I drew it. But then when you get to be like 11, 12, and you try and draw a giraffe and it doesn't look so great, that's the time of life where it's like you have to plow through, if you like drawing, if you like creating, and not being upset that it's not perfect. Yeah, and to that end, it's like what's important at that point is having parents or teachers, especially, because parents always love like their stuff. All parents love their kids' drawings. But I had teachers that just were super encouraging all the way through. Okay. So that's from third grade, the very first cartoon book I ever did. Okay. And then kept drawing. This is high school, which this cartoon wouldn't obviously make any sense, but that's just an example of like drawing for the high school paper. And then from there, this is when so this is in college. Ready, aim, fudge, ready, aim, flipper. This is kind of where I started to get into the whole idea of a single panel being the thing that I love to do, because I love to read those. And when I was a sophomore in high school, I was working for the high school paper and doing cartoons for the high school paper. And my journalism teacher, Kenny Zelnis, started bringing in the New Yorker magazines. And that was the moment where I was reading the New Yorker cartoons thinking, okay, I don't understand about 3/4 of these cartoons, but I know they're about something. And I know that they're, the humor isn't just silly humor like I had been reading. It was more intellectual. It was more just getting at something deeper. And so this cartoon is not an example of that, obviously, but that was where I decided that I really liked those single panels where the entire idea was in one shot, and so you had to tell the joke in one setting. And that's the tricky part, and that's what I liked reading, so that's why I started drawing. Okay. And this is also from college. Do I have to show you how to do everything? And so that's how you become a cartoonist in practice. So I mean, there's the idea of like, do you like drawing? Do you like thinking of ideas? Now, do you like conceptualizing? And all that is true, but there's the bigger question that a lot of kids ask me is sort of like, how do you actually in practice become a cartoonist? And so for me, it was always just wherever I was trying to find a venue, because there's something about drawing a cartoon at home and then just like throwing it in a drawer. But when you have to show people, it really, it's a double-edged sword, because you want the feedback, but it's not always, even to this day, I mean, it's not always great feedback. And I still get mail that's like not, I wouldn't call fan mail. So you have to put yourself out there, but that's how you also learn. So that's how you learn sort of maybe what's working with people, what's not working with people. And so what I started doing was gathering these single panel cartoons like this and making a portfolio of them, of my personal favorites. And then started sending them off to syndicates and started sending them off to other cartoonists. Okay. And so I started sending them off to syndicates. This is in my 20s. You can go through the next 5 in a hurry. These are all rejection letters. So all the way through my 20s, these are all, I just got rejection letter after rejection letter. And what I did was I took all these rejection letters plus another whole file folder, and I wallpapered the wall in front of my drawing table. And to me, that was sort of my motivation, was that I saw what I saw in the paper. I thought someday, like, somebody's going to be in the paper when I'm older, and why not me? And so I used these as sort of just an incentive to keep pushing, and eventually Creator Syndicate picked me up. They They had just dropped a single panel cartoon and they were looking for one. This is in 1994. And I got very lucky because it was nice. I mean, it was great that I got picked up by creators, and I think, yeah. And so this is the first week of my time with Creator Syndicate. This is the first week of the cartoons that they ran. What happened was, once they picked me up, it was in April of '94. In August of '94, Gary Larson retired The Far Side, and so all the newspapers in the country suddenly had this shape hole in their comics page. And from a sort of practical standpoint and from a formatting standpoint, they had to fill that hole with something. And if you bought a comic strip to replace it, then you'd have to move all the other, it'd be like this big puzzle on the comics page you had to move around. So it was way easier for them just to like look for another single panel. And to be honest, my influence wasn't so much Gary Larson. I liked The Far Side a lot, and admire Gary Larson like crazy. I mean, it's like he did some brilliant stuff. But my influence wasn't necessarily him. It was more sort of the New Yorker stuff. So I was really worried about having this work in a family paper as opposed to just, in sporadic magazines. So anyway, these next few are the first week of Speed Bump ever. We got to get belts. Okay. Sorry, I'm late, Bishop, but you know how it is. 1 step forwards, 2 steps sideways, 1 step forwards, 2 steps sideways. Okay. All right, hand over the money and no funny stuff. Well, okay, maybe a little funny stuff. Heck, we're clowns. Okay. Well, here's the earring you lost in your comb. And what the? It's that love and feeling. And this is the cartoon, apparently, that of my submission to Creator Syndicate, this was the cartoon that they saw that they decided they liked enough that they were going to syndicate me. So it wasn't really the whole package. It was like the president of creators liked this particular cartoon so much that they decided to give me a shot and give me a contract. And that's a very tricky thing because syndicates receive approximately 40,000 submissions a year. And this is at least back then. And they would submit between 4 and 6, or syndicate between 4 and 6 people. So the odds of this, I mean, it's like, my parents weren't exactly like thrilled that I was, it's like playing the lottery with your career. And so I was, doing other little things, other illustration jobs and things, but this was what I was really after. And you can't really get in the paper unless you're syndicated. Like, newspapers don't put comics on their comics page in general, just from freelance people, because you have to sort of trust the system and you have to know that you're going to get all your cartoons in a timely manner. And then it's a whole business model that's all set up. I think there's one more from that week. Yeah. Of course, Dr. Heimlich eventually improved his maneuver. So you can see that, I mean, my drawing style has changed a little bit, but especially my lettering, I really, in hindsight, like, I don't know, you can't even read that. I'm not really sure what I was doing, but I was, the thing about getting syndicated and doing a cartoon every single day in the paper is that you learn in front of people. And so when you first get picked up and you've got maybe 80 cartoons that you're really happy with because that's what they picked up to syndicate you, and then you use those 80 up in 80 days, and you wake up one Monday and you're like, oh crap, I don't have any cartoons. And so then you start over, and then it becomes the job, and that's when you start figuring out like how you're gonna do this. And so there's a lot of sort of growth. Was that growing pains? But yeah, you just kind of get through it, and you wake up and you do it all over again. You do it over again every day, and I've been doing that for 26 years now. So, okay. So this is probably the first philosophy cartoon I ever did. And so my degree, my undergraduate degree is a double major in philosophy and creative writing. And so those are two things that I haven't really taken any art classes per se. So my background is not in art, obviously, when you look at these. My background is in writing, and I thought I was going to be a writer. So I got my philosophy degree, undergrad degree from Eastern, and then I ended up getting a master's in creative writing from Indiana University. So a lot of my cartoons do tend to sort of dip their toe into philosophy. It's tricky because my job is to be as funny as I possibly can think of while trying to be about something. So I can't get too esoteric, and I can't make all these sort of Heidegger jokes or Sartre jokes or anything, but it does sort of inform, like I think what philosophy did for me in college is that taught me how to conceptualize. And so spending 4 years just trying to put ideas together, they weren't funny ideas, but the whole self-taught method of sort of, okay, how do I go from point A to point B with all these things in between, really taught me how to do it with humor as well. And so that's why when I say I'd like to take two things and mash them up, and this is actually another sort of example of that. That's, I was drawn to that because I already kind of like thinking that way, but it also sort of honed those skills. Okay. This is another example. Yeah, well, I didn't believe in reincarnation when I was your age either. And I just like that sort of backwards logic to that kind of joke. There's not much to the drawing except it's just a couple people, you have to show an older person and a younger person. But okay. This has nothing to do with philosophy, but it's the children's petting zoo. And it does tell you. So one thing about doing cartoons, probably anything creative, but especially cartoons, is that you can't get away from your personal life. So when you're sitting around thinking of ideas and daydreaming all day, your personal life creeps in, and if you've had a bad day, it's harder to think of funny things. If you've had a great day, you might be distracted, or you might just be hungry, or there's a lot of self-discipline that goes on, but also the idea of what's going on in your life always creeps in. So it's like some of these cartoons I've done about children, I don't think I would have actually thought of those ideas before I had children, because it just wouldn't be in that sort of primordial soup of my brain. So it's like whatever is sort of in your life at the moment is what you're trying to make jokes about. You just hope that what's in your life is in enough other people's lives that they will sort of have this common ground of where the joke starts. Okay. I'd like to try an experimental German treatment called Quit Your Bitchin'. That one almost has to be read out loud for it to work. Okay. He wouldn't hold still. I just like taking these ideas where the chalk drawing concept, and so then you just take like the next step. Like what would be some stupid thing that could happen from there? Okay. Hamburger helper. I just like this one because of the visual. The sort of composition of the cows up and over in a way. And I'm also a vegetarian, so I think that this may have been drawn right around the time that I became a vegetarian. Okay. The first rule of Mime Club is you don't talk about Mime Club. All right. Whoa, you've been working out. This one seems to have gone around a little bit. I've seen a few other versions. I think that may have gotten picked up by a couple of freelance people that didn't attribute it to me, but you may have seen it in a different style, and that wasn't mine. Okay. I can't say I'm entirely pleased with my hip replacement. What I really like to do with the cartoons too is not, I do this sometimes, but what I prefer to do is to tell a joke that needs an illustration. I don't prefer to just illustrate a joke, if that makes any sense. So I prefer such as like the reincarnation joke, where you needed to see an older person and a younger person for the joke to work. The same with this. It's like, it's not just a joke that you could read. It's a joke that you have to see because of the zebra leg. And I think, to me, that's like Bucky, you'll know this, like this the exact thing. This is sort of the sweet spot you're getting at when you do cartoons, is that you're looking for that visual, but that also has a joke. Okay. Crosswalk, happy walk. This actually came from, this is an idea from real life. My wife was off at the tailor. She was taking something to the tailor, and a guy walks out, and he's got a brand new coat on, and he's walking just like the happy walk guy. And the sign, and my wife Chris looks over and smiles at him. He said, "You got to walk like this when you got a new coat on." And I was like, what a great attitude for one thing. But it's like his posture, the way she showed it to me, it just kind of got the wheels rolling. And then it occurred, it's like that double occurrence where it's like, what a funny little drawing. But then the idea that the crosswalk sign, which is that's what it looks like in real life, he actually looks like he's mad now. Once you compare it to the happy walk, it's like it's just a whole body language cartoon in one sign. Okay. Oh, and so that's the cover of the Dogs Are People Too book. And so the next few cartoons are from that book, which are obviously going to be dog cartoons. Okay. Just drive in small circles and drop me off by that bush. Just a pooper. Just a bad pun, but if anybody who has had a dog knows that they tend to go in circles before they poop. At least my dogs have always done that. Maybe it's just me. Okay. The bad news is Fluffy ate the squeaker out of her toy. The good news is it's going to sound hilarious coming out. And sometimes with the jokes, it's just the idea that the action isn't happening right then. It's the action that happens either before or after the cartoon. So you're trying to pick that moment that tells the joke best. And for me, it's like if you had the dog actually pooping that out and squeaking, it wouldn't be as funny as sort of the anticipation of it. And then the dog's face sort of adds to that, because it's like the dog understands it and knows what's coming. Next, okay. Know your dogs, Labrador, Labradoodle. All right. That's my pee pad. Okay. The last thing Ray remembers before the squirrels scattered in different directions. That's another good example of that. It's like that pause before the action. So you don't have to show the action. You just like you extrapolate out in your head. And I think it's funnier for the reader to make the leap as opposed to being told the leap. Okay. The day Corky's head exploded. And this one is I like to show this cartoon because it's a good example of how subjective humor is. And so this one, I have sold the most prints of this cartoon of any of my cartoons, maybe all of them combined. And I've also received the most emails about this cartoon asking me to explain it. And so it's one of those things where it reminds me that I just have to make myself laugh and try and draw something that I enjoy and hope other people enjoy it. Because if you try and figure out like what other people are going to find funny, you just drive yourself crazy. Okay. Let me clarify. I'm sick as a dog, but I'm not as sick as my dog. I think I probably have another cartoon here somewhere with fishnet hose and a whip. Okay. And the next few cartoons are from Cats Are People Too, which is the follow-up to Dogs Are People Too. You know that's a scratching post, right? That was totally predicated on the pose of the cat. And so showing that the cat is using the scratching post as something else. The only way to do that right was to find like the exact right pose so that you would know what the cat thought the post was. The thing you don't want to do when you're doing a cartoon about pole dancing is to do a Google search on your personal computer at home, because it brings up all kinds of things that aren't family friendly, and you need to wipe your history really quickly. Okay. What did she do? I just like the expression on the cat's face because it's sort of smug. Okay. And this is a good example of what's called a pantomime cartoon. And these are more popular in other countries. So a pantomime cartoon is a wordless cartoon. And so in the United States, America is so big that you can have wordy cartoons like the Kathy comic strip or whatever, because enough people speak English. But if you're in a small country and you want to sell your cartoons all over the world, these are really much more popular, because then you can sell them and language is not a barrier. Okay. He always hides when company comes over. Okay. We have company. Okay, so before I became a syndicated cartoonist, when I was doing freelance, I was a political cartoonist. This is just to explain that sort of where my drawing style comes from and where my thought process is. I would love to still do political cartoons, but it's impossible to do, for me at least, it's impossible to do a syndicated cartoon every single day of the week and do political cartoons. And I found myself, once Speed Bump got syndicated in '94, I found myself unable to have time to read enough and to feel like my opinions, I could back up my opinions in a conversation. So this is a couple of examples. This is from the New York Times. This is how old I am. This is Bush Senior. Okay, and Saddam Hussein cartoon this is from Time magazine, back around the same time. I think it must be early 90s. Okay. So the politics does sneak into my cartoons, but sort of through the side door sometimes. So this is a good example. Oh, you don't need to fight them. You just need to convince the pitchfork people that the torch people want to take away their pitchforks. And so that cartoon is about something. It's about something political, but it's not overtly about a party or as partisan. Or in fact, this cartoon has been used on the left and the right as an example of their ideology. So I think people can read into whatever they want to read into with these kind of things. Okay. You know, you're talking to a plastic bag, right, Bob? This is kind of a newer cartoon, and this is just an example of not politics, but you know, like I was saying earlier, with personal issues. One of my personal issues and things that I care about and work for is clean oceans, and so I donate a lot of my work to clean ocean, you know, organizations and you know, environmental organizations. And so I tend to sneak some of these in, but I always try and keep them so that they don't hit you over the head and they're not didactic. I just try and keep it sort of light and funny, but keep the issue raised, if you will. Okay. Bob's a carrier of intelligence, but he's asymptomatic. This one, so the next couple, this is to talk about how sort of this last year has affected cartoonists. Some of us have decided that we're going to incorporate mask jokes and asymptomatic jokes, and you know, anything that's going on with COVID, you know, pandemic, vaccine kind of things, and not in a political way, but just it's part of the fabric of society now. You can't get away from it. And so I went back and forth on, should I just keep doing cartoons that don't address that, or should I address it, or should I use it? And it just felt weird not to. And we're all talking about it. We're all it's not just a discussion. It's like, it's actually, our lives are revolving around this right now. And so how do you ignore it? And so, and there's a lot of new fodder in it too, to be honest with you. I mean, it's like 26 years of doing this and you're always looking for new subject matter. So I got a few of those. Okay. My goodness, one little Google search and now all the ads in my feed are for arsenic and cyanide. And so this just that's kind of one of those jokes where you have to extrapolate out why she's been doing that. Okay. Aim for the ones without a mask. So, I mean, that's the kind of joke that kind of tells you where I stand on the whole mask thing. Oh, pardon me. You know, so that I feel like with the mask thing, if people don't agree with me on having to wear a mask, that's fine. But it feels so objectively correct to me that I'm going to go ahead and put it in my cartoons. And, you know, so I get mail, but just, you know, I don't mind. Okay. And so, so the number one question you get asked from your cartoonist is where your ideas come from, right? I mean, it's just, that's kind of the thing, because you can't really explain, like, it's not like math and it's not like science where you can say, well, you put this chemical and that chemical and then you end up with this other thing. It's just this amalgamation of all the stuff you've gone through as a person, and you're trying to find things that we all have in common. And so what I do is I don't sit down and draw, I sit down and write. And so I just write down, you know, like sledding or tea bags, whatever. And what I tend to do is, if you can see in there a couple of things, is like I like to use parentheses. So it'd be maybe like a phrase or a common thing, and then you put like a parentheses around one of the words. It makes me think, like, what other word could I put in there? How could I switch that around? Okay. And so then I'll start doing on the next page. So every week when I do 7 cartoons, like the first page would be those words, and the second page would be like me sketching these out just to see if it would work. Like, sometimes you don't know, you think you have a good cartoon idea and you draw it out and it's like, oh, that's crappy. And sometimes you're not sure and then you draw it out and it actually worked. So I do these little sketches and that gives me an idea. And sometimes I'll do a little tiny sketch I like so much that I'll actually just put on the scanner and blow it up and trace it. Okay, so you can go to the next one. I think in this one, it'll show you, yeah, so you can, I don't know if you can see in the bottom left corner, there's like a guillotine. Yeah, right there. Thanks. And that was, I kind of had this idea for the turtle guillotine, so I sketched it out. And I think the next one is the actual cartoon. Yeah. So that's they start out with like this most sketchy things you can possibly think of, and then you just start sort of adding details. And that to me is like, that's actually another good example of what you're trying to get at with the drawing, is that you want just the things that need to be said in the drawing. So, like there's like a little tree line back there and a couple other turtles, whatever, but it's not so busy that it gets in the way of the joke. And so that's the thing you learn as you do more and more of these, is like how much needs to be told and how much needs to be shown for the joke to work. Because you can really make it too busy, which I've done, and then people have to find the joke, or you make it not busy enough and people don't understand the joke because you didn't give them enough information. So that's kind of the trick, is find that middle ground. Okay. This is another perfect example. I remember when this was all forest with the candy house. I had on my pad, I had written down suburban sprawl, and I had there's other stuff, and then I had the witch in the candy house. And in my brain, I took those two things I'd written down, and they kind of collapsed on each other, and then it just became obvious that would be a setting for it. But then that drawing had to be a little more complicated and a little busier, because you had to know, like if I had just drawn the candy house with one house next to it, you wouldn't know this actually like in a suburb. The suburb and the subdivision was actually important to the joke. Okay. This next section is about editors. I love coffee, but it goes right through me. Okay, this is the cartoon that I submitted. And this is why I have an editor, because these are the things, this is the kind of cartoon I would probably put in the paper if I had my druthers, but I'm not allowed to. Okay. Same with this one. Michael, use your words. So I don't think this one ever made it into the paper. I can't remember. In the first version of this one, I actually had him flipping off the guy. So this is probably a little better than that. Okay. Remember, when we show mommy, we pretend this was your idea. Okay. So I think this is a stretch of cartoons I put in the PowerPoint that got me in trouble, because this one got me in trouble as well. Okay. Yeah, it was a nice neighborhood until the a-holes moved in. So what happens with these kind of cartoons like this is that we will provide the newspapers with a substitute if they wish. So that way I can actually try and get away with stuff if I want. And then if they run it and then people get mad at them, it's their fault, because they actually chose to put it in and we gave them an option not to put it in. Okay. You throw poop like a girl. I don't even know why this cartoon makes any sense, but I always like this cartoon just because the idea that it makes fun of that phrase. So that was the thing, is like the whole point of this cartoon was actually make fun of that stupid phrase. Okay. Another poop joke. I tend to get scatological from now and then, but this one, to me, I just liked it because the way the baby the toddler is walking seems to feel like a full diaper. Okay. There's that one, who's ready for pumpkin spice season. So more fishnet. Trying to draw that on a pumpkin was a technological challenge, but seems to have worked. Okay. Gumballs. So sometimes I don't do a lot of pop culture cartoons, but sometimes you have to assume that people know what you know. And so I just took a risk that enough people knew Gumby, which I'm sure enough people know Gumby, but then just make the leap to Gumballs. And I didn't get in a lot of trouble for that one, but I think people, didn't think as highly of me after that. Okay. Association of Podium Builders Convention. That's embarrassing. So this cartoon is an example of my editor and I missing something, because that turns out that's not a podium, that's a lectern. So the joke doesn't work at all, because I was trying to make a joke about podiums and I actually drew a lectern. Okay. This is an example of a cartoon I got in trouble for, and it wasn't my fault. This is the Reality Check Hotel. Mr. Schnell, this is your wake-up call. You're afraid to leave the job you hate. You're afraid to commit to a woman you love, and you stare at the TV instead of getting a life. For crying out loud, Schnell, wake up. Okay. I got a letter from Robert J. Schnell. And I won't read the whole letter, but the cartoon was very insulting to him because of his name. So it's one of those things where you just like, sometimes you're going to piss somebody off and you're just not going to know why. You don't have to read the whole letter. You can go on the next one. That's right, dear. Our ancestors had tails. And this is an example of how life and technology moves so fast. Because this one came out and it went around the internet. It was like this one seemed to do really well, like online. But you can see the little phones that are talking. Within a couple of years, those things were obsolete, and so somebody else made a cartoon. You can go to the next one of making fun of, not making fun, but using my cartoon. That's right, bro. Our ancestors had buttons. So I don't even know who made that. That just went around. That got like millions of shares, and I have no idea where it even came from. Okay. This is a good example of a cartoon that had a really sort of lovely result that wasn't intended. After this one ran, I got a really nice letter from a woman whose husband had passed away, and her dog had passed away 6 days after her husband passed away. And so, obviously that's just, it's horrible. She said when this cartoon ran in the paper that day, that she actually felt like the idea of that made her feel so much better. And so, obviously that's not why I didn't know that. But the unintended consequence in a positive way is like the most beautiful thing you can have happen to you when you're publishing something, because you hope that people like these, and sometimes they hit people just the right way at the right time. Okay. I don't care if we can fly, my feet still tingle when I look down. So this is an example. Not only did this take me about 3 weeks to draw, but this is an example of a cartoon where the drawing has to match the saying. The words and the art go together, because if you just had the pigeon sitting on a windowsill looking down, but you couldn't see what they're looking at, the joke, to me, the joke wouldn't work at all. Like, the only way this joke works, and it's not even that great of a joke, but the only way it works at all is to have this perspective. So when I got the idea, I thought, oh God, do I really want to draw this? This is what happens to me a lot, is where I get like an idea and I think, do I want to draw this? Because if it's about heavy machinery, I'm like, oh no. I really like drawings that are like animals or people. But if it's machinery or anything that's sort of mechanical, and you have to be just accurate enough for it to look like it would work, then it's just like, oh, it's a lot of work. And like I said, I didn't go to art school or anything, so I'm making this up as I go along. Okay. And you can go the opposite way too. Congratulations, whatever you do. So sometimes the art has to be much more complicated for the joke to work, and sometimes you hardly need any art at all for the joke to work. So all that said is that the idea is far more important than the drawing. The idea is always where you start, and so what you're doing with the drawing is trying to do justice to the idea that you've got. Okay. And so the next few cartoons are from Parade magazine. These aren't technically speed bump cartoons. They're just cartoons that Parade magazine used to run my work every couple of weeks. And that one says, someday you'll be a teenager and you'll want to sleep all the time, and then I'll have my revenge, which that was true to life. My oldest daughter was a spirited child. Okay. So another pantomime joke. And I think this one, to me, what made it work, at least to me, was the fact that like her hair is blowing backwards, which makes zero sense whatsoever. But it's like they got on that bike and it's actually doing what they thought it would do. Okay. Texting bee. Tomorrow, could you use it in an incomplete sentence, please? And this one I showed to my older daughter. This is like back when she was in high school. Because I said, hey, you inspired an idea. I was looking at your text, and she looked at it and she didn't laugh, and she said, Dad, there are only one R in tomorrow. I was like, oh, all right, never mind. Okay. This one is from the New Yorker magazine. Well, I better go now. I'm almost at the wall. And the New Yorker, for some reason, they had a company called Ringtails, and they would animate some of their single panel cartoons. And so they chose this one to animate, which I can't show you. It doesn't work on Zoom, but they turned this one into a little 10-second animation where the crash test dummy is actually like literally talking on the phone and saying, okay, I'll be home in 10 minutes or whatever. And then he crashes into the wall. And it made no sense. I mean, it really, to me, it sort of hammered home what you're trying to do with a single panel cartoon is that you have that nugget of a moment and you're trying to grab that one absurd moment where obviously there's not even time for like crash test dummy. I mean, crash test dummy is not gonna be on the phone, obviously, but from there, it's like there's no time for him to be on the phone. That's the joke. So when you stretch out the joke, suddenly the whole idea of the joke doesn't make any sense. Okay, anyway, next. And this is the last slide. And this is the cartoon that I submitted to the 25th anniversary book. And it was supposed to be a special slide-in plate that they would put in for the first 100 copies that people bought that I would sign. And then they forgot. So I thought, well, I'll show it to you, and then at least somebody will see this joke. So I think that's all of them, right? Yeah, that's just the title page from the book, right? That's just the placeholder. Yep. So good. That sort of, I hope that sort of sums up like what I'm trying to do, what I'm thinking when I'm doing these cartoons, where the ideas come from. And but I'm happy to answer. I'm sure I didn't.
I mean, at this point, if people want to go ahead and unmic, and if you want to ask questions, or if you want to put a question in the chat, that's fine too. But yeah, go ahead, Mr. Hubie.
So Dave, I really enjoy your comic. I mean, it's when I go to the comics page every day, I go directly to your panel.
Well, thanks.
To see what you've written today. But
that's so sweet.
I just imagine you having a certain muscle memory. I mean, you develop walking around in your daily life and seeing common, ordinary things that all of us don't give any second glance at. But you must have to develop a muscle memory for taking those common everyday things and turning it on its head, because so many of your comics take those common everyday things you look at and have that different perspective that resonates with people when you read your comics.
Oh, thanks. That's super nice. That's actually a really interesting point, because it raises something that I was going to talk about in the PowerPoint and I didn't, which is that, yeah, you do notice the common things, and you sort of, they sort of get stored so you can percolate on them later. But it's really rare to sort of be at the grocery store buying cereal or something and then get a cartoon idea about cereal. Like they don't just sort of hit you. They go in there. And then there's this really interesting book called Daily Rituals. I can't remember the author, but the whole book is just about famous creative people like Bach and Picasso. And all it does is it doesn't talk about their art. It talks about their daily rituals. And so, like, for instance, Beethoven got up at 6 a.m, he had a cup of coffee, he went for a walk, he went to the bathroom. I mean, like, it just tells you what their day was like. But the point is that they're not just walking around waiting for the muse to hit. It's like they actually had a routine, and creativity is actually really spurred by routine, which seems counterintuitive. So in my case, it's like, yeah, you go and you do your life, you pay attention to stuff. But then every Monday through Wednesday, I come up in this attic studio. I sit in the same spot. I have the same notebook, and I sit down and I have my brain says, okay, now it's time to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm not always thinking about jokes, but then when it's time to think about jokes, all that stuff is kind of in there.
Well, that must be a little bit of a burden when you're on a deadline. You have to come up with something, and that inspiration hasn't hit. I mean, you've got to produce.
Right. It's sort of inspiration, or it's desperation mistaken for inspiration, because the whole idea of a deadline is really a double-edged sword, because I don't know how many of these I would actually do without a deadline. And I've got every Wednesday at 7 p.m. I've got to turn in 7 cartoons. So I don't have a choice. And on Monday, I don't have any ideas. So it really sort of makes you do them. But after a number of years, like the first few years, it was panic time. You just be like, oh my God. But now I know it's like a job. And so I know where my brain needs to be. I know where my butt needs to be. I know where my notepad needs to be. And once you sit down, you start thinking and you start going over the things like you're saying, you can literally just go back through your day or somebody else's day, or just read a magazine and see what people are talking about. To me, that's really important, is reading a lot of stuff. So,
just one other observation. I'll let somebody else ask
Sure.
questions. But for me, a lot of what I really laugh out loud about, and I mentioned this on a Facebook post you had there with the cover of your book and the toilet paper aliens. To see that ship in the background, and they're so short that they're barely peeping out over the top of their ship. Stuff like that just kills me. To
Oh,
see
good,
that
good.
little detail off in the back somewhere.
I'm glad you noticed that, because I think a lot of us cartoonists do. We put little things in there that are kind of just for us. Like, we don't know if anybody's going to notice, you know. And if they do, it's a bonus.
Right.
And to me, the fact that you noticed that, like, is heartwarming to me, because it's like I put it in there just because I thought it was funny, but it wasn't necessary. But it just felt fun. And I think, you know, when you read these things, you can tell if somebody's having fun.
Sorry, the reaction on one of the other characters' faces in the panel, like the bikers on the treadmill. It's two guys over. He has a complacent look. He's just doing his routine. But the guy next to him's got big eyes and he's looking this way. You know, that kind of stuff kills me.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of it's just a feel too. Like, you draw it or you look at it, you think, what would people be doing? You know, I mean, and I don't like cartoons where it's over the top. I like the one person who didn't even notice. Like, to me, it's funnier that somebody wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead, Denny.
Yeah, I
Then we'll
was
get you,
wondering.
Lisa.
Yeah, Dave, I'm curious. Being a cartoonist is a very solo operation, but I'm wondering, are you friends with other cartoonists? Like, when I look at my funnies page, are there certain people on there that you know and are friends with, or is it just everybody does their own thing?
They're all a bunch of jerks. No, it's funny. We are, it's a small club, honestly, especially syndicated people. And we have a National Cartoon Society. So there is like a convention that, you know, annually we get together or whatever.
Yeah.
But because there are so few of us that do this, we do tend to sort of get together. We do a lot of these Zoom kind of calls with each other just to talk shop or whatever. And I would say a lot of my friends are also my colleagues, and which makes it really interesting, because then when I read the comics, like, I know a lot. I probably know about 90% of the people, just from, you know, whatever, drinking together. And so when I read their comic, I actually know the person, so I can see the person in the joke.
Oh, really?
And there are some cartoon strips where you see how the person is drawn walking. I'm like, oh my God, he's drawing himself just how he walks.
Really?
You know what I mean? So yeah, so really, yeah, it's a really weird sort of level of, but to be honest, like, I was, you know, almost all of them are just great people.
Right.
You know, a little weird.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa, did you have a question?
I do have a question. So, hi, Dave.
Hello.
I'm Lisa from Bend in Oregon. I have, I think, 4 of your original drawings.
Oh yeah, hi.
Yeah. So we shared pictures of Iceland and everything.
Yeah, good. To see you.
So you said that you draw a lot of aliens. You draw a lot of frogs as well. And I do rather like your frogs.
Thank you.
So my question really is around sort of more of an international flavor. Obviously, I'm British, for those of you who haven't figured it out yet. But you know, I think from a British perspective, I find all of your comic strips really, really funny. One of the ones I never really appreciated was the Gumby one that you showed, because we don't have Gumby in England.
Oh, right. Okay. Right.
But I like the way that you keep your humor accessible to everybody. And like you said, because a lot of it is more in the drawing, or a lot of it is in the drawing, it's more accessible, you know, if you translate it into a different language. I mean, I wonder how you do that. How do you stay away from stuff that just wouldn't work somewhere else? Because you seem to be really good at it.
Oh, thank you. I think it's hard to answer why more people would like that kind of humor. I guess what I'm trying to do when I do these, though, is try and stay sort of gentle and not sarcastic, if that makes sense. So, like, I try to make jokes, but I'm making fun of myself first. And so when I do these, I try and make sure that they're poking fun, like, with us, but not at anybody in particular. Like, they're not punching at anybody. It's just sort of an observation about what a lot of people might do. And so I mean, I really like, the last thing I want to do with these is to make somebody feel bad about anything. Like, so the more sort of broad, I guess, you go, the less chance of that happening. And so maybe to answer your question, the more broad you go, the more global you also go. And so the bigger the subject matter, more chances that more people will get it. To your point about Gumby in particular, that's why I don't like doing a lot of pop culture cartoons. A, because it limits the crowd, but B, because 10 years from now, nobody's gonna remember. Like if you did a Britney Spears joke or something back in the 90s, like and you read it now, you'd be like, oh, I don't know why that's funny, because you've totally lost the context. And so I'm trying to find things that like have sort of universal context and like a long arc context. So it's tricky because sometimes you can't find that joke. And so and then you find like a good, easy joke that's maybe more in the moment. And you have to sort of resist that temptation. Because the other thing to your point too, is that when people read a single panel cartoon, they're not reading Garfield. And so they know it's Garfield and they know Garfield has a certain personality. Like mine, I do a joke a day. So for me to have characters or for me to have recognition, it has to be my style. It has to be my style of humor, and it has to be my style of drawing. So when you see it, you go, oh, that's a speed bump, because it feels this way and it looks this way, but not because there's a person named Speed Bump. So consistency is like super important in a single panel. So I mean, maybe I didn't even know the answer to your question until I started blabbering, but I think that might be part of it anyway.
Well, you should draw more frogs, for sure.
Thank you. Those are kind of hard to draw, actually.
And the aliens, I like those too, obviously.
I think frog aliens are next.
Oh, please do let me know.
We do have a couple questions in the chat. So from Lori Keller, she says, hi, Dave, this was wonderful. I have a question. You are hilarious in real life. Some comedians I hear are serious, shy in real life. Do you find that most cartoonists are funny in real life?
Hey, Lori. Just for reference, Lori is one of the most brilliant children's book illustrators, authors on the planet. You ever seen Scrambled States of America or anything? She's a genius. So that's a great question, because I think if you go to the cartoonist conventions, and I'm not hilarious in person, just to disabuse that notion. I think people expect when they go to the cartoonist conventions, it's gonna be like spinning lit up bow ties and like beanie caps and stuff. But really it's almost, it's much more dry and witty. I mean, I find that the level of intellect is pretty high at these things. And I don't know if that's because people are making jokes for a living. It's hard to keep up, because it's not people cracking jokes, it's people being really witty. So when you get in a group of people, it's like trying to keep up. So it's not like they're making jokes, but they're playing off each other. And so getting them all together is kind of crazy, because it's just people who are used to thinking in terms of a reaction to a joke. And so you can be there all night. And there's, obviously there's a lot of elbows on bars when you go out with cartoonists too. So it's a great group. And it's funny. I wonder, to your question, I think a lot of, like, from what I've read, a lot of actors and comedians, they go on stage because they're shy. Like that's their way of expressing themselves, because they're actually shy in real life. Whereas cartoonists, like we're all, there's a question earlier about being solo all the time. Like I work alone in an attic all the time. So you get to hang out with some other cartoonists for a weekend, and yeah, you're going to let loose because you're always alone. So I don't know. I think most of us like being alone, but when we get together, we're more fun, because it's like you can't be alone your entire life. It's just that whole idea of like the crazy person in the attic is actually kind of true in my case.
Okay, I've got another chat question, then we'll go to Pat, who's got a question. How did you end up with the title Speed Bump?
Hey, Pat.
That was Pat's question too, I think.
That's a good question too, because there's actually a small story behind it. That it was when I got picked up by Creator Syndicate, my cartoons did not have a title. So when I was doing these cartoons, I was doing them for magazines. So, when you see cartoons in Reader's Digest or something, they don't have titles. They're just floating cartoons, and that's what mine were. So they asked me to come up with a title, and the working title had been something called Nuts and Dolts. And I thought Nuts and Dolts was like too mean-spirited. Just like you don't draw a character and then call it a dolt, because that's not fair. So I had to come up with a whole list of things, and speed bump was just like one of 10, because I thought it was it's easy to remember because it's a common phrase. You want something that like you don't have to try to remember. And something about it just felt right, like slow down for speed bump or whatever on the comics page. That felt right. But I had a bunch of other ones like Inside Out or Outside the Box or that kind of stuff. But my favorite one was The Wide World of Stretch Pants, because I thought that like when I drew my characters back then, everybody was sort of like doughy and I don't know, everybody's just sort of squishy and soft, and I like drawing that way. I don't do that quite. I've evolved sort of out of that, so it's good I didn't use that. But the reason I didn't pick that name was because it's too long. Like, so in practical terms, you couldn't fit The Wide World of Stretch Pants over a single panel cartoon. You had to go on a comic strip. So the unanimous choice was speed bump in the creator's office, and I said, yeah, all right, yeah. I mean, I didn't really. It's weird. I didn't really care that much. That was the funny thing, and now I really like it. To be honest with you, I'm really, in hindsight, I'm really pleased.
Okay, so we have a question from Bridget. Hi, Dave. Thanks for such an inspiring conversation. Your work is so clever and smart that it gets shared globally on social. Have you gotten used to when you come across your work and it's either not linked to your page or your name is cropped off?
Wait, say the second half again.
How do you feel about when you come across your work and it's either not linked or your name's cropped off?
Hey, Bridget. How do I feel about that? Not happy. That's the really big downside. Online is such a double-edged sword too, because you get tons of exposure. I mean, I've had these cartoons go around with millions of shares, and not a penny from them, obviously. But that's just, that you're not closing that barn door anymore. That's just the way it is. And so I allow free usage on social media. If somebody asks me if they can post something on Facebook, as long as it's not some corporation or something, just people or a small organization or whatever, that's always free. And if you ask me, I just say yes. But people take these things and then they take your name off, which is egregious and obviously illegal. But you can never track it down. I mean, that's the frustrating thing, is like I've lost hours of my life just trying to track it down. But everybody says, "Oh, I got it from somebody else's page." So you could go back like 11,000 pages probably just to try and find who actually did that. So then you learn that that's just a big waste of your time. And that's the thing that's frustrating, is because like I would have let them use it. So there's no reason for them to do that. And then they'll get altered and they'll get altered, and then they'll go around, and then those will actually get more shares than the original. So once my website's taken up, I don't even have that exposure. So it's just something that's out of you can't control, and you have to sort of just clench your jaw, and that's part of doing business these days. And then it gets hard, because if somebody uses it for free and they've seen it that's been used for free, and then you charge for it, they're mad because somebody else used it for free and now you're charging them. So there's not really a good answer. There's not really a good way to. I don't know how to fix it, to be honest with you. But I'm not going to go offline. Okay, not going to go out off the grid. So.
All right, Bucky wants to know, he says, hi, Dave. With so many cartoonists venturing into children's book market, can you talk about your work in this area?
Oh God, Bucky. Hi, Bucky. That wasn't the question I was expecting from Bucky. Yeah, it's children's books. A lot of the cartoonists, I think, because syndication is, it's not dying. I mean, and papers are they're getting smaller, but papers are, they're hanging in there. People still read them, and they're online, and so the business model changes. And so you get, it used to be you get a certain amount of money from, like, I'm in the Washington Post, and so I get, for the print version of the Washington Post, I get X amount of dollars. But then the online version of the Washington Post, I get a smaller X amount of dollars. And so now the trick is sort of like getting a bunch of little X's instead of like a few big X's. But it's still sort of, it is financially hitting a lot of the cartoonists. And so a lot of us are going into children's books because those aren't going anywhere. And we already like to draw and we already have ideas. And so I've got a series, a chapter book series for like early reader, mid-grade readers, like ages 7 to 11. I've done some picture books. It's all, part of it's because you want to branch out a little bit, but part of it's because if you're a creative person, like I just love doing my single panel. That's my favorite thing in the world to do, is single panel cartoon speed bump, like that, hands down. But I've been doing it a long time. And so sometimes when somebody offers you the opportunity to have like a big book, and they say, okay, take your ideas and see, you can put them in a different shape. You can go in a different direction. You can do a different kind of humor with them. It's really tempting. It's really fun because you push yourself a little bit and you find out things about yourself. Sometimes they're not good things about yourself, like you're not good at those things, but it's also a fun challenge to create creatively. So you're seeing a lot more of the cartoonists from the paper doing what Bucky said, which is like going into the children's book market, because it's a solid market.
All right. Catherine has a question. Hi, Dave. Thanks for this. You are one of the few people who makes me laugh. Do you draw on paper and pen, or do you use apps and paints or computer?
Yes, the materials question. Yes. Thanks for that. I'm super old fashioned. And I think I'm one of the last people left on the page that doesn't use a computer at all. So I scan my cartoons, but what I do is I draw them on just cardstock. And so they're about this, just for example, this is the size I draw them at. This is one that I just did last week. It'll be out in about 6 weeks. So I draw them all on paper. I just use these technical pens. They're refillable cartridges and different size nibs for that, but it's just pen on paper over and over and over again, and then they get scanned in. And then I have a colorist at the Syndicate, and what I do is I tell him how I want it colored. So I give him very specific instructions because I'm very tech illiterate, kind of by choice, and just because right now I don't have to be. I've got a colorist who's a super nice guy, and he's on staff and he's really, really good. So it makes me not want to learn because I don't have to. If there's something I don't have to do, I'll do something else. But the main point is I really enjoy paper and pen. I mean, the tactile experience of it. Then you have a piece of original art. So a lot of people now are doing them on tablets, and they look just the same. I mean, I'm not bashing digital or tablets by any means, but then you just don't have a piece of art at that point. And so I really like doing that, and I still actually do all my lettering by hand. I haven't created one of those fonts or anything that types in for you. I mean, it's like everything you see on the comics page is something that came out of my pen, and then sometimes I'll go in and clean it up a little bit or something. But no, I just it's not just because I want to be old fashioned. I just really like it. Like I really, really enjoy cutting the paper and drawing the box and drawing the cartoon. I mean, I really enjoy the experience and I enjoy the process. And that's why whenever I talk to like high school kids and college kids about doing this kind of thing, it's not so much that oh, I want to be a cartoonist, or oh, I want to be a poet, or I want to be an actor, or whatever. It's like, you don't want to get to that point. You want to be at that point. You want to enjoy doing that thing, because you could say to yourself like, oh, I want to be a cartoonist in the paper, without knowing what that actually means. And then we wake up a year later and you're like, oh my God, that's hard, or that's not what I thought it was, or whatever. I mean, you have to actually enjoy doing that creative thing, because it will get old after 26 years. You'd run out of ideas if you didn't enjoy it. So to me, that the whole challenge of like sitting down and like, I don't have any ideas, and then by the end of the day I have 3 ideas, it's like, it feels like a small miracle to me. And even if they're bad, I just feel like, wow, this morning I didn't have those and now I have those. That was fun. Like, I feel like it's almost a childlike thing where I'm still 5 and I'm drawing that giraffe and I'm like, holy shit, I drew a giraffe. It's just, I still have that. So when I lose that, it's probably when I'll stop.
Hey, Dave, Bucky Jones, Des Moines, Iowa. Big fan of your work. Not a fan of you, but big fan of your work. No, I'm just kidding. He's a good friend. Hey, I do have a serious question for you though. Dave, I remember years ago, I don't know if I was talking to you in person or not, but you had mentioned that you sort of separate your creative talent from your computer. Because I remember you saying that you had your computer and everything in a whole separate room from where you do your creative work. And I don't know if you still work that way, but I've never forgotten that, because I think for me personally, and so many other cartoonists, we're distractible monsters. And I remember you saying that it was a distraction for you to have it in your office. Do you still work that way, where you have it off in a separate, or have you changed that?
I have sort of changed that. It's like, and by the way, Bucky is a genius cartoonist in his own right. He's terrific. That conversation I remember because that was when I could put it someplace else. So now in the attic, I have it on the other side of the room.
Okay.
But so what I tend to do is close it. I mean, I think distractible monsters is like the perfect description for us, because it's when you work. I mean, some of you may work at home too. And probably during COVID, like people working at home for the first time are starting to understand this. It's like there's a million things you could do besides what you're supposed to be doing, including just like eating. I mean, you just go downstairs to the refrigerator or something. It's just like it's so easy not to do what you're supposed to do. So yeah, you gotta trick yourself a little bit, sort of, and that's what I think that goes back though, really to like the whole idea of the routine, the ritual, right? Like, I mean, I think I would guess that almost all of us have some sort of, like, a lot of the cartoonists, I could never ever do this, but like Stefan Passis, who does Pearls Before Swine, he goes to a cafe and puts big headphones on and he'll have like heavy metal music at 100 decibels or whatever, just like so he can't hear anything, and then he thinks of his ideas, and that would kill me. Like, I don't even know how you would ever A, listen to that crap, but B, sit in a cafe and just like have people around you serving you, and then you're thinking of cartoon. I mean, like, I need no one around, just has to be totally quiet. So,
And he's
I'm
not
sure
nearly as cool as you are. I've met him, so I can say that.
Oh, you met Stefan, right?
Yeah.
He's the coolest man on the planet.
Nah, he's nice. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I have one. Yeah. Thank you for doing this. This is
Hey, guys.
wonderful. Hey, Dave. So when you talk about the rituals and things like that, do you have a set time schedule every day? Maybe you touched on this and I forgot, but a set time schedule that you work on every day, or do you go up to the attic in the middle of the night when you get an idea or something like that?
Yeah, when I go up to the attic in the middle of the night, it's just because Chris is snoring. But otherwise, no, it's a good question, because I do have a very specific schedule, honestly. And I wonder, I'd be curious about, like, with other creative people, like Knight's a musician and just absolutely brilliant musician. And I would like, oh, and by the way, these two are newlyweds, just so congratulations. The idea that you could just go and do it anytime is too hard for me. So it's like every Monday I come up and I do my Sunday cartoon, because the Sunday cartoon is a big one. And that's like my day. And then Tuesdays and Wednesdays I come up same time and I get 3 ideas before lunch and I draw them before I go to bed. Wednesday I get 3 ideas in the morning and I draw them before I go to bed, turn them all in, and that's the speed bump week. So Thursday and Friday are my flexible days to do children's books, or I'm the principal cartoonist for a company called BarkBox, and so I do their dog drawings, all that kind of stuff. So that gives me some flexibility. But yeah, to your point, it's like I actually, you have, it's like almost to Bucky's point too, is like you have to give yourself a sort of made up deadline. You know what I mean? Like, I would imagine, even if you're writing a song for something, like you think, okay, by Friday I'm going to have like the lyrics or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you tell yourself you don't have to. Like, you don't have to, but you tell yourself you have to. And it's the only way to get anything done. I mean, honestly, like, if no one was waiting for these, if for some reason I was like independently wealthy from some, I can't even imagine what that would be, because I don't know what that feels like, but it would be like, would I do these? I would want to do them. But like there's something about having a mortgage that makes you creative all of a sudden. And so yet it makes it easier to have a time slot. where you just know you're going to do it. And then you tell everybody you can't do anything else that like, everybody I know is just like knows they don't bother me on Tuesday or Wednesday because I will blow them off because I have to do what I have to do. In case I never like if I've never texted you back on a Tuesday or Wednesday, that's the reason.
I was wondering.
Yeah, that's why you asked, isn't it?
We have another
Thanks.
question.
Great answer. Thank you.
Have you ever met Bill Waterston?
I don't know that any of us have met Bill Waterston save for a couple people. He's really, really private. The closest I can say is that he really likes my book. That he told me through another, like we have a mutual friend that he likes the 25th anniversary book. So that was like my favorite moment of my career last year, was getting my friend forwarded me an email from Bill about my book. So that was good. But I know as far as ever meeting him, he doesn't, the only time I ever saw him in person actually was Ohio State University has a triennial cartoon festival, and they have big names come in and talk about cartoons. And back in 1992, he came to the festival, and this was like 92 or 95, I can't remember, it doesn't matter, but he was like in his peak, like he was really hitting its stride and it's famous. And he came in with bodyguards to give a speech. So we were all sitting in the auditorium, and he came in with some big guys, and he gave his speech, and the whole speech was about the dinosaurs, like the people like Beetle Baileys of the world and High and Loises who were taking up space in the comics page. They need to make way for the new people. So, I assume he was sort of newish. And then he walked out and he wouldn't talk to anybody or anything. The next day, Mort Walker came in to draw us Beetle Bailey. And he's like, I'm one of the dinosaurs. And so he rebutted it. He had this whole sort of big controversy in the cartoons amongst the cartoonists about if on the comics page, how long do you leave things in? Like, Charles Schultz died a long time ago and they still run Peanuts. Like, should you make that room for somebody new? Or, there's a point to be made that enough people still love Peanuts that it should still be in there. It's a democratic thing. So they have these surveys and people vote in the surveys about comics page, and whoever wins. So it's not a question I can answer, but that's a convoluted way of saying that I've seen Bill Waterston once.
Speaking of the new book, want to hold it up?
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to do the pitch.
It looks like this.
Okay, so if you want a signed copy of this, there is the bookstore in Ann Arbor called Nicola's Books, and it's like 10 minutes from your home. And Dave goes and signs, and he'll personalize, and so I think everyone should have a copy.
You can even tell me what to draw.
And yes, and I can show you in the Bark Box book that he has drawings in. This is what he did for us.
Oh, did I do that for you?
You did.
Wow.
Yeah. It was Toscanazi. That was the other dogs.
Oh, okay.
Not the ones that are trying to get your attention.
Dave,
oh my gosh.
Apparently you've done this before, where you write something personal to somebody. And I got this for my wife, and
oh, nice.
And this was for her birthday, where you just say happy birthday. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
there's something specific in this other one that she doesn't want me to talk about. So I'll just say you wrote something personal. But I went to put this on my bookshelf. We both read it cover to cover, and I'm like,
Oh.
what's this one? And like, oh, I've done this before. Or he's
that's
done this
hilarious.
before, So,
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Just so you know, he read the book before I did, and it was my birthday present.
oops,
There's that.
big fan. What can I say?
That's extremely flattering. Thank you.